Man, it's always a pleasure to see my friend Gary Myers. And when I hear from you, Gary, I just can't wait to dig into your books. And we talked about Once a Giant. There it is for those watching on video. Awesome book, looking back at Lawrence Taylor, Carl Banks, Phil Simms, and looking back, but also bringing it to today and how those Giant players are getting through life on a day-to-day basis. It was gripping. It was chilling. Mark Bavaro, my God, his stories. But I think that this next book will absolutely appeal to everyone as well. Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate. Oh, I'm covering up Belichick's face. There we are. He wouldn't like that. He'd send his henchmen after me. Full disclosure, I need to dive into this book still myself. It is on the nightstand. Once we were just talking about it before air, like this football season starts, and it's just very survive in advance, especially with 3 children and bedtimes with the 4-month-old. But no excuses. We're gonna get into it. I have a million questions, but first of all, how in the hell are you, Gary?
Ty, I'm doing great. It's been an interesting football season here in New York. Not too many victories, but lots of interesting stories. Obviously this week with Brian Dable getting fired, which is really unfortunate. I really like him a lot, and I hope he gets another opportunity to be a head coach. But I'm doing a radio show in New York now on the ESPN station on Saturday afternoons. I'm looking forward to having you as a guest, and so that's been an interesting new experience for me, hosting a radio show for the first time, but it's been a lot of fun.
I know we've got a lot of podcasts here that go along, but kind of like similar to you, the foundation for how we cover this league is the writing and the long form. But sometimes it hits me like, man, there's so many stories tucked away in our stories and stuff that's left on the cutting room floor that, hell, we should be podcasting, and you should be talking football for 3 hours because you've got a lot packed into that brain, man. You've been covering this game for a long, long time.
Well, I call it institutional knowledge.
Yes.
That, it's funny when I'm doing the radio show sometimes and people ask me a question, the stuff that, pops into my head to tell the listeners, sometimes it just goes like back to things that happened in 1985 when I was in Dallas. I start telling stories about that. There is a lot of stuff in my head. I'm not sure I have quite enough brain cells left to handle all of it, but it's been fun. I mean, covering the league, I've covered the league since 1978, so wow. I've seen and experienced just about everything you can, covering a single league for that period. I mean, it's coming up on 40 years, which is 50 years actually. Say I've even lost track of that. Yeah, in a couple of years, it'll be 50 years since I covered my first game. In 1978, it was a Giants game at Giants Stadium for the Associated Press.
Love it. So what inspired Brady versus Belichick? I think it's a topic that it's been written about in books, in magazine writing, in day-to-day coverage by those Patriot beat writers. And there probably is a part of you that thinks, man, what am I going to glean that isn't already out there?
Right. There has been go ahead, finish. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, like, what kind of like lit that flame to be like, okay, there's something deeper here worth a book. Like what really got those juices flowing for you, Gary?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And you just mentioned there's been a lot of books written about the Patriots, a lot of really good books written about the Patriots dynasty. I don't know that any of them just focused on the one issue of who gets the credit between the greatest coach and the greatest quarterback, and how do we divide that up, and how do we look at the different eras of that 20 years or the different segments of that 20 years, where I think you can split it up into 2 10-year dynasties. They won 3 Super Bowls in the first 10 years, 3 Super Bowls in the second 10 years. There was a transition there between it being a Belichick dominated team to, certainly I would think a Brady dominated team over the second half of the dynasty. And, where did that transition take place? Had the dynamics of the team changed during that period of time? And then in addition to that, just speaking to as many people as I could about to get their opinions. Who do they think gets the credit?
Yeah.
How is the dynamics between Brady and Belichick, and where did Kraft figure into all this? The Dynasty documentary that was done, the 10-part, I think it was 10 parts, I thought was fascinating. I thought it was kind of slanted uh, negatively, especially in the last few episodes, negatively towards Belichick, and I didn't necessarily think that was fair. But um, I, I thought there were so many different ways to approach this that hadn't been explored before, and that's really what inspired me.
No, I'm sold. I mean, you're right. There are some incredible books. The Dynasty, It's Better to Be Feared, Seth Wickersham's
Yeah,
book, the
that was a
coverage
great book.
of everything, and but we can't get enough, right? And there's a reason we can't get enough. You've got the greatest coach ever, the greatest player ever, and they made it work for 2 decades. I always use the analogy, like, me and my college roommate, we were best friends back in those Syracuse days, but you're around somebody for a while, and that was just 3 of the 4 years. No, 2 of the 4 years we were roommates, and we got on each other's nerves, man. There were times we were at each other's necks. I can't imagine, the cutthroat world of pro football every week being life or death. It's championship or bust, and what that relationship was really like. So I think that everybody out there should read it, should listen to it, and it's kind of interesting because here in Buffalo, with Brian Dable, we're going to get to Dable and the Giants on the show for sure. With him becoming available, it raises the question of, should the Bills reach out to him? Maybe not OC, but being a consultant. Hell, maybe he should be the head coach in 2026 if they fall short again. And the reason being, him and Josh Allen had something special here. It was described to me by a ex-Patriot and ex-Bill as just almost like a father-son dynamic. And Dable knew how to get the most out of him. And this player, I'm getting to Belichick, he made the point that, look, Brady co-signed and empowered Belichick like every step of the way.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a 6th-round pick, terrified that he's going to be replaced. Quote, so he became exactly what Bill needed him to be, a good little soldier. All of a sudden, he becomes the greatest player in the history of our game. But after he got conditioned to Bill's way, Bill Belichick institutionalized the shit out of a 6th-round pick and then became the greatest player ever. So, I mean, we'll never see a dynamic like this again, right? Like a 6th-round pick who just is that good little soldier institutionalized and becomes the greatest ever. Can you just get into that relationship, how it started and why it's different?
Whose quote was that?
I can't say. It was
okay.
It was an anonymous player who
Oh, okay. I didn't feel like that was
I'm sorry, it was in our McDermott problem series from 2023 part 3.
Okay.
His point being, like, the Bills had something so special in Allen and Dable, and they let it out the door. He thought that this is the kind of relationship that could really rival Brady Belichick, Reed Mahomes. He gets into like the Reed Mahomes dynamic, but that Brady Belichick push and pull, he could tear him down in the film room. And if he's tearing Tom Brady down, like, of course the other 52 guys are going to do their job if Brady's going to do his job.
Yeah, I was going to say that was such a good quote. I wish I had it in my book. But yeah,
Thanks.
I mean, I think that clearly Tom was very grateful that Belichick drafted him. At that point in the draft, number 199, he would have been happy if anybody took him. But Belichick, his influence on Brady early on has really been overlooked because I think we tend to have recency bias when we evaluate their dynamic, and people want to say, well, look what happened when they split up and Tom won a Super Bowl and Bill struggled. I didn't take that into consideration in evaluating this at all, because to me it was how do you judge what they did together, not what they did separately. And I thought that was the key part of it. Obviously, Brady had a lot more success apart than Belichick did. But early on, Ty, I mean, it was, he kept him as a 4th-string quarterback as a rookie. Nobody does that. Now, a lot of that had to do with the Patriots had such salary cap problems. They were looking for cheap labor to fill out the roster. And, I mean, that's exactly what happened. And Belichick saw enough in Brady as a rookie in training camp that, there's something here I might be able to work with. And then he fell in love with him the second training camp. And I have people who've told me that he actually wanted to start the season with Brady as the starter over Bledsoe. But Bledsoe had just signed that 10-year, $103 million extension. I think it was in March of 2001, that made him the highest paid player in NFL history. Kraft was opening his new stadium the next year. He looked at Bledsoe as the face of the franchise. So Belichick didn't have it in him to go and say to Kraft, that guy you just signed to a $103 million extension? He's my backup quarterback for the opening game in Cincinnati. He didn't have the security to do that. Plus, what he had gone through in Cleveland with Kosar and the backlash, he didn't want to do it again with Bledsoe. So when Bledsoe got hurt against the Jets in the second game of 0-1, which was the first game after 9/11, um, no coach ever wants to see a player get hurt, obviously, especially seriously like Bledsoe did.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the greatest thing that ever happened to Belichick's career because he got to do what he wanted to do was that and play Brady. And then 2 months later, when Bledsoe was healthy, he stuck with him. So look how much how much Brady meant. How much Belichick meant to Brady's career through that point where he drafted him, he kept him, he stuck with him, and then got rid of Bledsoe at the end of the season. So without Belichick, we might never have heard of Tom Brady in the NFL. If he went to Cleveland, the graveyard for quarterbacks, or pick any other team, he might not made it out of training camp, might have bounced around practice squad to practice squad, and gone into private business by 2003. Who knows? So
Yeah.
early on, it was definitely Belichick. Later on, it was Brady.
What do you think he saw in him that early? I don't know if many people know that, Gary. In training camp, like what's popping in practice to be like, wow, I'll bench a $100 million quarterback in Drew Bledsoe, who has taken this team to a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I think what happened in that first year was he saw how Tom became a leader of the rookies, and showed that skill where people gravitated towards him. And Belichick took notice of that, and and clearly, saw something in him on the field. It wasn't just the leadership skills. Now, Dick Rabine, who was the quarterback coach, was the one who was really instrumental in convincing Belichick to draft Brady. He loved him in the draft process. So by the sixth round, Belichick got tired of Rabine basically standing on a table and saying, take this kid. And so he took him. Now, unfortunately, the next summer, I'm not sure if you're aware of this story, Ty, Dick Rabine, who was the quarterback coach and very close to Brady, he passed away right at the beginning of training camp in 2001, Tom's second year. And Belichick did not hire a quarterback coach to replace him. Belichick became the quarterback coach and was very close to Brady, along with Charlie Weiss, who was a great offensive coordinator in those days. So Belichick met with Brady every Tuesday night during the season, and once he became the starter. And he just saw everything in him that he wanted. A guy who took care of the ball, who followed the game plan, who wasn't, going out on his own and changing plays, and somebody who would work within the system and was getting the job done. They started winning games. Belichick was 5-11 his first year with Bledsoe, and then they lost their first two games in 2001, so they were 5-13. And then I think they were 5-4 or 5-5 overall, and Brady was in like 5-3 when Bledsoe was ready to play again. And he took a chance on splitting the locker room by making that decision because Bledsoe had a lot of those guys, especially the offensive linemen, who were Bledsoe guys. But it worked. With the players, when it came down to it, Ty, the players said, "You know what? We're winning. We want to win. We love Bledsoe. We weren't winning with him, so we're putting everything behind Brady." And it just took off from there.
Bledsoe was pissed. He still is pissed. I've had him on this show, and you can tell in his voice, like he still doesn't like how that went down when he, suffers this brutal injury, debilitating, could have died. It was that vicious of a blow from Mo Lewis. But when he does return, and he thinks it's his job to keep, Bill Belichick says, "Sorry, Drew, we're sticking with Tom Brady." That's why I love having this conversation. This leap of faith from Bill Belichick is kind of getting lost in history to an extent. And maybe it's the Jordan Hudson nonsense. We're all just obsessed with this all, and it's weird. And his inner circle, like back then, he had people in his inner circle would call him out on his shit. Later in his career, not exactly. But that was such a leap of faith. And then my mind also goes to that Super Bowl against the Rams when, remember John Madden on the broadcast? Sure. And he says, all right, they better not take a chance here. I'm paraphrasing. Like, you got to get to overtime. And Belichick, that's his decision. That's a leap of faith. Like, no, let's try to win the game with this rookie quarterback.
I basically used the transcript. I found the TV copy of that, and I have everything that Madden said to Summerall. exactly what you said. That I'm playing. I started on the 17-yard line. I can't remember exactly how much time, but it was less than 2 minutes, I believe. And Madden is saying, let's play for overtime. You got, basically a rookie quarterback out there. You can't take any chances. On the sidelines, Belichick says to Charlie Weiss, let's go for it, but play it safe. Don't call
Yeah.
anything where we're going to turn the ball over. And once they got out to about their own 40-yard line, Weiss goes, we're going for it here. We're going to get into field goal range. Vinatieri was a great kicker. And Tom was nearly perfect on that drive. I mean, that drive. That was a Belichick team defense running the ball. They hit the snot out of Marshall Faulk every time he got the ball. But what everybody remembers from that game is that last drive, Tom getting him to position to kick that field goal. When you mentioned Bledsoe before, I interviewed him for my Brady Manning book. I didn't call him for this one, but in the Brady Manning book, and I repeated some of this in this book, he feels that. I said, what would have happened to Tom if you didn't get hurt? And he goes, he might have been a good backup in the league. Maybe had a chance to start, but would not have been here. But then I say to him, okay, now that we know what happened once Tom became the starter, would the same thing have happened with you? Would the Patriots won all those Super Bowls? He goes, I can't say that. So at least he was self-aware enough to know what Tom became, and whether he could have. I mean, nobody else really could have done. I mean, Joe Montana couldn't do that. He won 4. He didn't win 6. He won 4. Didn't get to 9. It was, such a unique situation, Ty, where you'll never have the greatest quarterback and the greatest coach ever again in their primes on the same team, and at their best, their absolute best for basically 2 decades.
That's what I want to ask you. It's like the Ryan Holiday book, Ego is the Enemy. And you see it in sports with greatness, Shaq and Kobe. Pick any all-time duo, trio, and eventually ego kind of enters the equation. Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, and Draymond and Klay Thompson, they could have won 8-9 championships, but even then Durant's like, I kind of want to do it on my own. Like I want to prove it. That I don't need this other person. Like how there had to have been times when Brady and Belichick clashed down those lines as they're winning so much. Like when did they clash? And obviously the end gets all the headlines and eventually it ran its course, but 2 decades they lasted together. How was this relationship able to last that long in this kind of a profession?
Well, his dad, who is very outspoken, Tom Brady Sr., and he kind of used that you mentioned before about, the soldier. He said Tom was the perfect soldier for Belichick because Belichick early on realized that Tom had really thick skin and liked to be coached hard. So he picked on him all the time, all in the interest of making him better. But after you win 3 Super Bowls, you kind of like the coach to show a little more respect rather than being the first person you call out on Monday morning. You've just won a game 35-14. The first words out of the coach's mouth is, Brady, you idiot. Well, not idiot, but Brady, what about
you
that
mother effer?
Yeah. What about that interception you threw in the third quarter? And Tom's sitting there going, Coach, we're up 3 touchdowns at that point. Why are you picking on that play? And it wore him down after a while, Ty, that, by the time he wins maybe his 4th Super Bowl, which was 10 years after they won the 3rd one together, which is amazing gap, and they won 2 more even after that. I think Tom got tired of being picked on and was thinking, hey, man, go pick on somebody else. This shit is old. I'm tired of this. But Belichick never changed. So I think what happened was after they beat Seattle in that Super Bowl after the 14th season, that, Tom had sacrificed a lot financially by taking below market contracts. So Belichick would have that extra cap room to keep the team strong around him. And Kraft had sold Brady on that. Tom, we can pay you what everybody else is making, but look what's happened to those teams. The talent around the quarterback, gets worse. It's just not as strong. I can't figure the word I want to use there.
No, I got you.
But yeah. And so Kraft sold Brady on that whole idea, take less money, we can pay others, and we'll keep winning. Well, Tom started looking around at where Belichick was using that money. And so around that period of time, 14, 15, his free agent signings sucked. His drafts weren't as good. They started bringing in, guys who weren't necessarily met the Patriots standard on character. You think about Aaron Hernandez and then later on Antonio Brown. And Tom goes, what am I sacrificing for financially? And I'm the bullseye for this guy. It's target practice on the practice field in the meetings. He keeps picking on me, and he just got tired of it. So I think that's where the disconnect was. And I would say like the last 6 years, their relationship wasn't anywhere near what it was over the first 10 years. And it wasn't like Tom developed a huge ego because he was never that guy. He
Yeah.
just wanted to be treated with the respect you'd think a guy at that point was considered the all-time greatest quarterback, and the coach was treating him like a fourth-string rookie, when he's 35 years old.
And part of it is admirable. I feel like the quarterback right now in New England, Drake May, I spent a little time out there talking to his teammates. Joshua Dobbs was great. I'm sure you've run across him through the course of your career. Man, if you want to learn something, always go to the backup quarterback. But Josh McDaniels, who was there with Brady and infamously with the Raiders, you hear stories about how hard he is coaching. And he saw that dynamic with Belichick up close. He's coaching Drake May hard, and May can take it. And we're seeing Drake May as an MVP candidate right now. And I feel like with, I'm going to sound like a middle-aged, bald man myself here. It's like it's the Generation Z athlete who's making a lot of NIL money that's coming in. I don't know what the percentage is, but I'd say most of those players coming in, they don't be talked to a certain way at all. They've been coddled since they were 12, 13 years old. They've been recruited since then, the best of the best.
Yeah.
So if the player who can take hard coaching and is willing to get better in ways that they can't even see, they're going to have an edge in pro football. I feel like that's what we're seeing out of Drake May, and how that's what we saw to the extreme with Tom Brady.
Yeah, I think these college players, if the coach looks at them funny in practice one day, the next day they're in the transfer portal.
Right, right.
If they're not starting exactly when they want, they're at another school the next year. Josh McDaniels coached Brady really hard. Anytime you saw a blow up on the sidelines, it was Brady and McDaniels. It was never Brady and Belichick. Tom hardly talked to Belichick during the course of the game. And I think the relationship between Brady and McDaniels was always really good personally. Professionally, I think towards the end, it deteriorated. And I listed that as one of the reasons that I think Brady wanted out. It wasn't at the top of the list. Belichick was at the top of the list that he wanted to leave. But his relationship with Josh towards the end wasn't like it was for most of their time together. And I felt like what people had told me is that McDaniels, through Belichick's direction, wasn't including Tom as much in the game planning that he had earlier on. And that's because Belichick was trying to phase Brady out. And there's so much to talk about in terms of how towards the end, what happened with their relationship, and how Kraft regrets siding with Belichick over Brady, and that second Super Bowl against the Rams when they held him to 3 points after the 18 season, I think it was the 18 season. How that convinced Kraft that Belichick still had his fastball. So when Belichick was trying to push Brady out, Kraft sided with Belichick because Belichick was saying, hey, Robert, this guy only's got a year or two left. We got to transition away from him. And Belichick just put together this tremendous game plan against the Rams in the Super Bowl. So that is what convinced Kraft to side with Belichick. Belichick was coming off the season where he benched Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl. And Kraft basically put the coach on double secret probation the 2018 season. If they hadn't made the playoffs, or they had lost early in the playoffs, he was going to get fired, and Brady was going to stay. Because they won that Super Bowl, it changed the course of history in New England.
It's amazing because I get the logic. We see it. Every other quarterback not named Tom Brady, they get to 40, 41. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is impossible to watch right now. What's that?
I mean, Aaron Rodgers looks washed to me. And,
completely.
Russell Wilson,
pathetic.
He wanted to play till he's 45. And, the reports are this morning that Jameis Winston is starting Sunday for the Giants, that, Jackson Dart's still in the concussion protocol. And Mike Kafka is jumping Winston over Wilson, which is how it should have been from day one here. And
totally.
But Wilson wanted to play till he's 45. I mean, he might be done. So what Tom did, it was just absolutely amazing. Will never be done again. To have, and he got his team in the playoffs all 3 years in Tampa. I definitely saw it in the end, a declining of the skill set there. For the first time really in his last year, I said, I think he's done here. But to keep it going until he was 45 was just amazing.
That's the miscalculation, I suppose. You didn't realize you have this alien in your building that defies logic. And
Yeah.
I don't know, so do you give us a conclusion? Is there an answer here? Is there a personal opinion on who deserves the credit, Brady or Belichick?
Well, yeah, I wasn't going to leave the readers hanging and just say, they needed each other, which they did, and they both deserve credit, which they did. But it was not a 50-50 split. Now, it was definitely Brady. I've been trying to hold this and get people to read the book.
Yes, I was going to say, you don't have to give us an answer, but we'll take it.
I'll just say it wasn't 53-47 or 55-45 in my opinion. It wasn't 80-20 either, which a lot of people are saying mainly because of the recency bias of what happened in Tampa. I'll just say it was I give Brady in the low 60s on deserving the credit, which I think was really fair. And in my mind, I don't know how you feel about this. The great quarterback is always more important than the great coach. It's great when you can have them together. I think the quarterback can overcome an above average, but not a great coach. I don't think a great coach can overcome just an above, kind of an above average quarterback. The quarterback to me is always important. And I think that was proven out in New England.
Totally agree. That's why it's always important. I think when some of these head coaches talk, look for that finer language. Read between the lines. Do they get that? Do they understand who really stirs the drink? Do they know who's making everything go? If they don't, that's a problem. Without naming some names.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, and I think that Belichick was his own worst enemy in the end. Kind of feeling now, I don't know if it was an ego thing or he truly felt Tom was about done, but he should have just played it out, let Tom make the decision on his own. They made the playoffs in the last year. I mean, they lost in the wild card round to Tennessee, but it wasn't like Tom was done at that point, and Bill just let.
The receivers were pretty bad, from what I remember. Really they couldn't get separation.
Yeah, I mean,
Edelman was hurt. Maybe
Gronk had retired. Edelman was hurt. N'Keal Harry was a bust. I mean, he really had no one to throw the ball to, and that strictly is a blame that you place on the coach, not the quarterback. And I mean, just getting to the playoffs that year. Now I remember they lost their last game of the regular season against Miami at home, which cost them home field advantage in the playoffs. So they get stuck in the wild card round. Mike Vrabel comes into Gillette all fired up to beat Belichick, and they dominated that game against New England. And Tom's last pass was a pick six.
Logan Ryan.
That's right, former teammate Logan Ryan. And that's unfortunately was, the last pass he threw as a Patriot, which wasn't quite fitting ending to his career. But listen, I think Belichick definitely wants to coach again in the NFL. And the only reason he's in college because he couldn't get a job in the NFL. He wants to get those 15 victories to pass Shula. He wants to win that Super Bowl to say he won one without Brady. And listen, this is a total long shot, complete speculation. But if the Giants would have called Belichick, I don't see how he says no, despite what he said in his press conference this week. I don't know that they'll ever call him on this job. But there's a lot of talk here in New York that's a phone call that the Giants should make.
Yeah. Final thought on these New York Giants. What the hell they do? Is that the next course of action? Not sure I would do that if I was John Mara, but you never know what these owners are thinking.
I don't think that'll happen because Joe Schoen is leading the search. I think what they really need to do, Ty, is they need to hire a coach who's been a head coach before. Whether that's a guy like Lane Kiffin, who only lasted 20 games with the Raiders, but that's kind of like a badge of honor because Mike Shanahan lasted 20 games with the Raiders and went on to win 2 Super Bowls with the Broncos. And, he coached Jackson Darton at Ole Miss, so he'd hit the ground running coaching him. Whether it's a guy like Mike McCarthy, who would not get people excited in New York, but you have to remember all he did was win 12 games every year in Dallas. Just had a hard time in the playoffs. Whether it's a first-time head coach, which I would not endorse, you pick out the hot coach, whether it's now his name is escaping me, the offensive coordinator in Seattle, Clint Kubiak, whether
Yeah.
whether he's the next Ben Johnson or not, I don't know. I think there's going to be a lot of names, that come up. I think it's a key to have somebody who is totally sold on Jackson Dart, and the development won't skip a beat, because he's really going to be a special player. Ty, once he learns to protect himself on the field, because
Yeah.
he's such a competitive guy, once he learns to protect himself on the field, and I think the concussion the other day will teach him a lesson. I saw a lot of great things in him, in his handful of starts. He's got to remember he's not built like Josh Allen, and he
Right.
can't take the hits like Josh Allen. And once he learns that, and stops being so stubborn, I think the Giants hit it big and having a franchise quarterback here. They just have to bring in the right coaching staff. I feel bad for Dable because he did a great job with Dart in the half season he got to work with him. It's just that he couldn't win close games, and they kept blowing big leads on the road.
Speaking of Dable, I got WGR calling me to talk a little Brian Dable, so I better run off. I want to talk to you forever though, Gary. So let's do it again soon.
I hope so, and I appreciate you having me on.
Hey, everybody, buy Brady versus Belichick. I'm going to dive in tonight. Can't wait. Thanks so much, Gary.
All right, take care, Ty.